cap to 800, and that we set the date of the ability to get that 1% at the date of the proclamation of drought by the governor.
Second? Is there a second? For discussion?
And I just wanted to clarify, Ms. Spivey-Weber, and that would be also removing the 0.5%.
All right. So is there a second or an alternate motion or something so we can discuss? Or are people ready to deal with motions? I'm going to ask for discussion, and I may ask for some public comment back, too, because I really do want to hear from folks.
I'll go ahead and second it.
Okay, for discussion purposes. It's appropriate for me to ask Mr. Darling back, is it? Mr. Darling, come back. I'm not asking you to argue with board member Spivey-Weber. I'm just want your insight because you all worked on this a lot as professionals in the field, and so they're I mean, it's good anyway, but I really, in terms of hearing it, I see a reason for doing the incentive. I also see you get more projects if you do it the other way. So what's your
Well,
reaction?
what we can rely on is the survey that we've taken, and we resurveyed the 75 projects that were said that they could be in construction in the next 3 years with that range of interest rates. We didn't ask specifically, is it do or die at 0.5% or 1%, so I can't make that case for you. But it is, the idea of a yard sale is, it is right on. And this is a time of a drought. We want that attention here. We want them to come and apply and even get a backlog list. So I really encourage, I came here hoping that we would get less than 0.5%, just for that exact reason, though, was to incentivize and get the money out the door. But what I can say, though, is as I sit here, I feel as though I haven't done our coalition maybe justice, in that I didn't realize that I had never heard the number that if we went to 1%, there'd be $800 million available. That wasn't in the staff report. That's new information today. And what that is doing, though, is it's taking away from the local share. And we're talking millions of dollars. When you shave 0.5% and you look at each of those projects, what that might mean to the local share, that, I think, if you're going to do that, then maybe we shouldn't decide this today. And we can come back and show you what the cost is to the local share. Because all I can say is that it's many millions of dollars. And I think if the idea is to get the fire sale, get the enthusiasm, get a backlog, at least stick to what staff had originally recommended. And I didn't realize that they were going to come in and recommend something different.
No, I looked at the charts that you gave in terms of what the actual cost payback analysis that somebody sitting there would do, and it just seemed intuitive to me that there are going to be some people who will pay attention to the half that might not pay attention to the one.
Right, and truthfully, it is speculation. I get that, but to the extent that we provide the program out there, and I would just recommend sticking with what staff had recommended. See where we're at, like you say, in October or December, and have another discussion. But to move away from that and up the interest rate.
No, but we're not really upping it, right? It's, you asked 0.5 to 1, right? I mean, that's, 1 was there on, in your survey, correct? Okay, so we're within the survey.
That's right.
Okay.
Right. So it is speculation. I mean, we'd have to resurvey and say, is this a do or die for the project if it was 0.5% or 1? But what I can't present, and that's what I feel kind of downtrodden about at the moment, is I can't tell you what that just did to the local share if you do that. And I think it's significant. And so just to do it because you think it'll stretch the dollars more, I buy into that too. But on the other hand, I think there is that nudge that we're after at the 0.5%. Let's try that and reassess. And so that would be my pitch.
Mr. Victor Valley.
Bob,
Bobby's giving me the go up there and talk to him finger. So I do what Bobby says. Just to give you a perspective on what it means to the local share, the difference for our project is just a little over $4.9 million in additional costs that our community would incur. And it turns out to roughly about $350,000 or so on an annual basis for the term of the loan. I could be off about 50,000 on that, but if for our project, that's what it means in real dollars and in real impact.
Thank you for having it. That's where I think we could eat up all the money easily in some of the big utilities, and maybe a lot of acre feet in some of the big utilities that might do this otherwise. But for the smaller ones without the same income base, I would like to do it's not a yard sale, it's a fire sale. It's a drought sale. It's a something. I mean, and then we see where we are. And maybe it's guesswork, but
Well, it's like when you have the coupon at Macy's and you have to get there by a certain time.
No, you get the coupon every other day.
Well, but then when they have that extra.
yeah.
Okay,
So
I want to ask,
what-
I want to ask my colleagues if, when this comes back up and people are begging for like another year of half, we're going to say no, right? Anyway,
I would say we'd look at the data again and see where we are and see if we've been able to pull in hundreds of millions more from the federal government, and then
Well,
maybe
right.
we would.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm thinking, because we show an even greater need than what we all thought, because folks
Right.
are coming in. What I'm wondering, we have all these comment letters, and they were commenting on, I think I know the answer to this, but they were commenting on a program in which there was a 0.5% and then 1%. So this change shouldn't affect those that have provided comment letters in support. I'm just concerned about those that aren't here, like San Diego, Alameda, the North Valley, Stanislaus.
Michael.
I'm just trying to figure out, I don't see that it would affect
think
them, but I'm
your
just
microphone.
wanting to,
Staff
Make
can
sure.
opine on the extent to which it affects them. I mean, the range of options that are on the table before the board, I mean, it is fairly noticed, and you have the opportunity to make logical outgrowth changes from those. I mean, it's your call, the extent to which, for example, if the board is concerned about some of the issues that have been raised by Mr. Darling and would like the information that comes from reaching back out to the stakeholders, that's always an option you have, is to hold it open so that information can come back to you. Because obviously there are a lot of different pieces that interlock here, with the match being something that I don't think, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Mon, but I don't think that the staff have necessarily thought about all of the different nuances that come about as the rates change. Obviously, we think about the implications on us and the number of projects we think that can apply, but what it means for their other funding matches is something we don't necessarily always look at.
And if we're going to hold it open, then I would say, in follow-up to your comment, Chair Marcus, I would support considering the 0.5% rate for some of the smaller communities. I think what we're talking about is fine-tuning the various tiers, actually establishing tiers, really, right? Because, let me backtrack. Are you suggesting a 0.5% for everyone, or 0.5% for the smaller communities that are going to be developing new projects?
I'm suggesting we go with the staff proposal and then see what we get and evaluate in the future on the assumption that it will bring in some folks who wouldn't come in otherwise. I think we could try and fine-tune this to death and we'll never get it out the door. So I'd rather try and go with this, and we'll be talking about it every 6 months, and then we'll fine-tune it. I just, I don't want to put it off to study it to death, and I don't want to make a change I'm not comfortable with today. That's just my view. I think they worked on it, staff worked on it, I trust them, and I'm ready to go for it this way, and then we keep working on it. But trying to make it just perfect, like creating another in-between tier of above a disadvantaged community but not a big one, that's complicated and will take a long time. I'm making it's based on analysis, but I'm making an intuitive leap about also sending a really important signal out there that we really care about recycled water, and doing it as soon as we can, just as I've asked that we find every way we can to accelerate the general permit we're going to do for recycled water,
Yeah.
just because messaging is very important and it gets people attention. We have their attention now. We might put the perfect message out later, it won't be heard. So,
And if maybe I could jump in here on disadvantaged communities, because that's something I feel very strongly about, but I wouldn't favor doing that in this context, just because I think we need to really think about how to structure it. You know, what exactly is a large community, small, disadvantaged? So, and I would like for us to request that staff report back probably within enough time after the drinking water program comes over here, assuming that it does, so that we can have, you know, just maybe a workshop just on that issue, which I suspect Liz is thinking about anyway.
So
she is.
if I can, to help move the conversation a little bit, I know that there's a motion on the table or on the floor. And there was, just for purposes of getting a sense of what Ms. Marcus's proposal to go forward with the staff proposal would encompass, because I think the staff had some fine-tuning changes. I propose that Mr. Mon read out some of the changes that he was contemplating based on the testimony we heard today that would help streamline the original staff proposal. And
Okay.
then as the board member who moved the item, if there are any comments you have on that, and we can decide whether we want to move further with an alternative motion or if the board would like to move to votes.
So I'm going to do the conceptual, and David Rice is going to read the actual language that we're going to change here. But
And so you're going to say what it means, and he's going to say how you have to say it?
yes,
Okay.
because he's
This
my
is kinda
attorney,
fun.
and he does a good job of doing that.
That's kind of fun.
So what we noticed, the way that the resolution was written, is that we have these in-betweeners, see another term I'm going to throw out there, of these projects that have a complete application, but we haven't set the interest rate yet. So we were interpreting, and the intent that I shared with the board earlier today and so forth is if we haven't set the interest rate, they would be eligible for this new interest rate. But if you look at the way the resolution is written right now, it talks about complete applications between the board date today, March 18th, and December 1st. That isn't as clear as what we're trying to get across. We want it understood that if they've got a new interest, if they've got an interest rate, they stick with that, but if they haven't had a set interest rate yet, they would be included. So, David, can you read in?
Good morning, David Rice with OCC, fairly new to the SRF program. A little closer. All right. Would it be easier if we maybe tried to show the resolution? Why don't we go ahead and the publicly noticed draft, and just so that it would be to page 2. It's actually the version, none of the 3 that I emailed you, but it's the original version. Right.
I know Courtney's about got it. What we're going to be drawing the board's attention to is just making a change in the table.
And go over it.
Yeah, David, why don't you start going over it, and Courtney will pull it up.
Okay. If you take a look at the table under provision 3, it sets out a time period for when the complete application is received. And so for the 0.5%, it opens on March 18th, today's hearing, 2014. It closes on December 1st, 2014. That could certainly be interpreted to preclude us from offering financing for any complete applications that were received prior to today. and I believe the intent and what we've expressed is to pick up some of those projects. And so I would suggest that, just to make the table a little bit simpler, to delete the words opens and closes, and just for the line that says 0.05%, replace March 18th, 2014 to prior to. So it would be that the complete application would be received prior to December 1st, 2014, and then that would pick up all those previously submitted complete applications. And then for the 1% line, just change it to from December 2nd, 2014 to December 1st, 2015. And then I would also suggest, and this is something that Board Member Moore kind of, I believe, touched on, I would suggest deleting the 1/2 GO bond rate line, because that just restates existing SRF policy, and it actually could be read to narrow our ability to offer financing below the 1/2 GO bond rate. And so I know that the intent was just to kind of express what's existing in the policy, but I think it actually could be seen as narrowing it. So I would suggest deleting that. And so those are my suggested revisions.
That's it?
Did you want more?
So do,
No,
so,
I just thought there would be more. I don't know.
so to be clear, that means that the only 3 projects that will not get the advantage of the 1% will be the 3 Visalia projects. Is that correct?
The 3 Visalia projects would not get the 0.5%. They would stay with what they got, which was 2.1%.
Right.
All right. Weren't you thinking there was some way to give them 1% because they're sort of closer
They
to the
are
line? I'm not
closer.
trying to give money away, but
They are closer, and one option would be to take those 3 projects with Visalia and give them 1% interest as opposed to the 0.5%, which would be a significant reduction from the 2.1% that they have right now. So it'd be giving them that opportunity.
But, give us the but. How much money then of the 400 million would be available to really new projects?
We would not include if the board wanted to give Visalia the 1%, that would be discluded from the 400 million and the 200 million. So the board, as it stands now, would be the same number I told you earlier today, about 200 million worth of projects that would be left. That assumes all the projects that we have in-house now would still go forward as originally proposed. They would, can I use the term again? I liked it, gobble up 200 million of the 400 million, and so we'd have basically 200 million left at 0.5% and then 200 million at 1%.
And that's the part that gives me pause.
Me too.
Which is why I will still second the vice chair original motion.
And I just want to be absolutely clear. No one would suspect that I am not a huge, gigantic, enormous, unbelievable fan of recycled water for disadvantaged communities, for small communities, for large communities. I absolutely am. What I worry about is when we go out on the bond market, which we will have to do if we have this 0.5%, and we'll have to do it sooner than we would have if we had gone to the 1%. We will then be offering those who are a little bit tardy, maybe 3 years out, they're going to get higher bond. They're going to probably get higher interest rates because we will have gone out on the bond market. Now, maybe we'll be lucky and the bond rate will be low. Christopher, shall we take a bet on that one? But, you know, I really want to maximize what we have now. So that's my reason for doing this, it's not because I am not supportive of recycled water. There is no greater supporter of recycled water than me. So I just want to make sure that that's absolutely positively clear.
Ditto.
So as much as I want to help out Visalia, I'm seeing that they did not even provide a comment letter. Were they expecting to get a lower rate?
We never promised them a 1% rate, no. They did come in and talk to staff. I talked to them. I think even Tom talked to them at one point, so that they would understand what the board was considering. But we explained to them that they had already been in the pipeline. If they had any new projects coming forward, they would be considered with everyone else. But there's been no promise to reduce their interest rate, no.
So there's a lot of different ways to gobble up money.
Yes,
One
there is.
would be 1% for Visalia. Another would be 0.5% with or without. Well, Visalia wouldn't be in the mix on that. The other would be 0.5%. And without Visalia in the mix, then that chart is it's the way you have it, 400 and 200.
Right.
Okay.
Do you guys have an opinion on the 0.5%? I mean, you put that in as your proposal. I actually, even though I ask you a lot of questions and all that, I give a lot of deference to what you propose. Did you? And yeah, I'm not questioning. I mean, Fran, nobody's a greater champion of recycled water
He
than
is a
Fran.
great champion. We know that.
I don't know. Bomb and Shake may give you more money. What do
I
you
don't
think?
know.
Maybe not. Maybe not.
I think from a
Martha?
staff perspective, if the board wanted to do the fire sale, that's what, the drought sale, the 0.5% was the way to go. And we were reacting to what we heard from the industry as far as lowering it as low as it possibly could be. I do believe it's more sustainable at the 1%. We could do that longer. We could do, more money. There has been a great interest. I know Dan Newton, who can't be here, has told me he's getting calls all the time about interest now, that the interest rate's going down. And I agree with what the speaker said, in particular Bobby Larson, that if we can get the message out there that we're willing to look at the debt structure with subordinate parity and so forth, that's going to make a huge difference.
How about what board member Spivey Weber said about higher bond rates down the line? Will you explain that to me?
Sure. Well, the quicker we use up the money that we have cash, the quicker we're going to have to go to a bond sale. When we go to a bond sale, we'll be in the bond market, and depending on what rates we get for selling our bonds, we will have to pay them back. The only way we can pay those back is by the interest that we receive. So, our normal interest rate is 1/2 the GO bond rate. It chews into our overall capacity to loan out money, but we have a very robust program right now. We've only made 2 bond sales. One of them was to refinance, really, our first one. So we have a lot of capacity, but we do have to charge interest when we're in the midst of a bond sale because we need to pay back timely those bonds.
But if we go to the market sooner and rates are on the low side, does going sooner mean our rates will be higher? I'm sorry, I don't understand how it works.
I would say that's
Well,
very
it's,
speculative at this point in time because we just don't know when we would go, what the bond rates would be. We know overall, unless Christopher wants to.
I just don't know how to weigh that argument.
No, I would agree with the word speculative. Nobody knows what interest rates are going to do in the future, and so you can talk about it qualitatively that yes, we are going to pay more in interest probably on the bonds that we sell versus what we would charge folks, you know, but that's just inherent in the program. And so everybody faces that.
If I may suggest, we have a motion and a second. Could we take a vote on that and then determine where to go after that?
Yeah, we could, unless anybody has anything else to say.
Could we amend the motion to include the changes that staff made to the table, or is that unnecessary because it would be back to 1%?
That was I construed that as an alternative motion. If you'd like, I think I have some language that would reflect the motion that was made by Member Spivey Weber that I can read into the record, although I haven't had the chance to share them with division staff. So if David or the division has concerns about the language, they'll let me know.
All right, do you have signal language too? Emoticons, substitutes, whatever?
Hashtag.
Yeah.
All right, so essentially this would be a new operative resolved 3, and I think that this reflects what the motion is trying to do. And it's in particular the dates that I think you want to pay attention to, Mr. Mon and Mr. Rice. And this resolve 3 would read, establishes a 1% interest rate, comma, with an aggregate cap of $800 million, comma, through December 2nd, 2015, for those applicants that submit assistance applications for recycled water projects, period.
The only thing I think that's left out of there is when does it start? And what I had proposed is that we go back to the drought proclamation, which was January 17th.
Yeah, I didn't keep reading on my notes here, sorry. Applications for recycled water projects submitted after the governor's drought proclamation, comma, January 17, 2014.
Yeah, the only problem with that, as David's pointing out, is we did have applications in-house. It would be more with the language, maybe Ann's pulling that up, where we haven't set the interest rate. So it's not completed applications, but projects where we haven't set the interest rate. And or, you know, completed applications by that end date.
So we would amend this table in provision number 3. We could change the title of complete application received, complete application and or received and or interest rate established. No.
And I think what Michael's proposing, I would agree, we would just get rid of that table because we don't need it. We could describe it in the one-line language.
Good.
And so as you're figuring that out, so if we were going to look at what Board Member Dodek was saying about really incentivizing, you would do it a different way, right? You might give 1% to folks that were already in the pipeline and a short window for 0.5% to draw in people who wouldn't come in otherwise. So that might be an alternate way to do it as well.
Yes. The harder thing for us is we kind of looked at these different scenarios. We haven't looked at that one per se. I think we'd be comfortable still going with the 400 million at 0.5%, just dollar amount, but tweaking the 1%.
Yeah, I don't want to make it too complicated. I'm just trying to sort out all the, you know, there are an infinite number of ways to do this, so it's a certain amount of guesswork involved too.
So going back through, I'd added into my language the one clause about the governor's executive order and the proclamation. And in working through with council here, and I want to confirm it with Mr. Mon as well in the record, that if that reference to the drought proclamation is removed, and you already have an operative provision up there in the bullet immediately before the new provision that I just read that excludes applicants that have been assigned an interest rate. So if the new Resolve 3 just reads, establishes a 1% interest rate, comma, with an aggregate cap of $800 million through December 2nd, 2015, for those applicants that submit financial assistance applications for recycled water projects, period, it should be enough to capture what both Victor Valley as well as what Member Spivey Weber's been reading. So essentially that's the exact same language I just read in. I'm providing a clarity and removing the reference to the drought proclamation.
And then removing the table with the March 18th and the...
Correct. And then essentially what would happen is the existing number 3 would be stricken in its entirety, which includes the table that follows as part of Resolve number 3.
So Michael, could you please read that new Resolve 3 again?
Sure. So to replace the existing Resolve 3 as well as the table that accompanies it, there would be a new resolve that reads, establishes a 1% interest rate, comma, with an aggregate cap of $800 million, comma, through December 2nd, 2015, for those applicants that submit financial assistance applications for recycled water or water recycling projects, period. And that allows us to reach both forward and backward in time with the limitation of if they have an executed agreement in-house. And what Ms. Hartridge is pointing out is that for now that we've struck in the table for continuity's sake in the existing Resolve 4, we would strike the language and or transfers from one category to another because we no longer have different categories of interest. And the one thing that I would add gratuitously as my recommendation, having heard the conversation today, is there was an interest to revisit this later this year to see how it's actually played out in light of the changes that the board's contemplating. And the board could always add an additional resolve clause directing the executive director to schedule a further board item on this matter before December 31st, 2014.
Yeah, we could, of course, we can always do that. I'm sitting there thinking about the Victor Valley math and others where it might really make a difference to some groups, and that's just where my heart and my gut are going. So we could resolve it in 6 months, but people will be in the 1% system. So it would be like then in 6 months we would review it, and then we might say, oh, we should have done a 0.5%. And so that's just why, to me, it makes more sense to lead with the lower, and also as opposed to worrying that we're going to have to spend more when we might or we might not spend more when we go to the bond market sooner. We'll vote. It's not the end of the world, but I just don't like making a decision like that based on different hunches we all have. So, but let's go with the motion and see where we are. So we have a motion, a second. Any more discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right. Motion, aye, and then motion carries. I'll oppose. Okay, good. Moving on. Thank you for all your work. Item number 4.
Yes, item number 4 is a drought update, and we have Les Grober and Jim Castle will be
It's still morning. Good morning, Madam Chair Marcus and members of the board. I'm Jim Castle, Assistant Deputy Director with Division of Water Rights, and also have Les Grober here, also Assistant Deputy Director for Water Rights. And we also have Amanda Montgomery, who's our Chief of our Permitting and Transfer Section, and John O'Hagan, Chief of our Enforcement Section. And following up on the theme of the drought, we're here to update you on the drought activities within the Division of Water Rights. All right. Okay, beginning with curtailment activities. At the February workshop, we gave you some examples of how we were looking at curtailment for the San Joaquin River watershed. And that is still our primary watershed of interest. We have, besides looking at just the supply and demand projections, we have been considering other factors to determine whether or not we should send out curtailment notices or actual curtailments. And in the, especially for the Sacramento and San Joaquin River watersheds, we're looking at whether or not the major reservoirs are storing water or are releasing at this time. And most of the major reservoirs, as of today, are continuing to store water. So if we did curtail, these would be post-1914 water rights, and we would prevent these reservoirs from storing water. So that's a primary consideration. The delta is currently in excess conditions, so the projects aren't releasing water from storage to maintain water quality objectives. So and many of the senior water right holders, the larger senior water right holders, are delta diverters. We don't think they're being injured at this time, so we don't think that curtailing really would be a benefit to these diverters.
Generally, when you get to curtailments, I know we look at the river gauges. Do you get seniors, just in a normal case, you could have a senior say, hey, that guy's taking water that's cutting into my water.
We could if we were to issue curtailments. I think the...
but I mean, if has anybody asked you to pull the trigger on curtailment?
Not yet, not that I'm aware of. I was looking over at John, who is the...
We have not received any formal complaints alleging injury to prior rights related to the failure to take action on curtailments. We have talked to many of the representatives of the major watershed, the stakeholders in the San Joaquin, and in fact they are looking at a potential request to not curtail certain water right holders above them because they feel it would not do any good.
Mm.
Sorry
to interrupt.
No problem. By not any good, these are smaller diverters, and they probably need some benefit for health and safety needs for their water rights. John touched on the next bullet here that we have been discussing the curtailment with many representatives from various watersheds, and we are continuing to monitor the water supply and demand. So I'll give you an example of where we are with the San Joaquin River watershed. This is a daily graph, so the scale on the left is actually acre-feet of water per day, and the green line is the actual water supply, and you see the spikes are those precipitation events that we had. So and then those are plotted over the projections of water supply by the Department of Water Resources. The 90% exceedance value is on the bottom, and the 50% supply projection is the blue. So right now we're falling somewhere in between those two projections. And then this is similar to the graph we showed you in February, the water supply versus demand curves for the San Joaquin River watershed. And so the dashed lines are, again, the 90% exceedance value and the 50% exceedance value supply projections by the Department of Water Resources. The red line is our demand for riparian and pre-1914 water rights. And again, this demand comes from our water rights information database for water use reports that were from 2010. So it could be that we just aren't seeing the demand as compared to previous years because of the precipitation. But so in this, with just looking at the riparian and pre-1914 demand curve, we would say that we would not be curtailing those parties at this time. But then if we jump up to the yellow line, which is a 1919, post-1914 demand, we would be looking at curtailing post-1914 water rights at that level for 1919 and later at this time, just based upon the water supply versus demand. But again, we wanted to consider those other factors, that the delta is in balance, and we don't think by not curtailing at this time, we don't think we're injuring many of the larger senior water right holders. And we haven't received any complaints from anybody else. This situation could change quickly if the delta then goes into balance, where the projects are releasing water from storage to meet water quality standards. Then I think we need to think seriously at that point about curtailing the post-1914 water right diverters at some level. Now I was going to move on to the temporary urgency changes and water transfers since that we've been acting on or dealing with since the February workshop. So we have, on March 7th, we received, we did amend the Sonoma County Water Agency's urgency change order. The original order was granted on December 20th and changed their hydraulic index for their fishery flows to maintain more water into storage. The March 7th amendment added terms for mandatory water conservation. On the urgency changes, we are currently processing 2 change requests. The first is from Rancho Murrieta to reduce their bypass flow to allow more water to be stored in their reservoirs. We also recently received a request from the El Dorado Irrigation District to relax a fisheries-related release requirement in their wastewater change petition order. Now, it's important to note on this EID petition request, it's for irrigation supply and not necessarily for health and safety municipal supply. Finally, we had a pending urgency request from the city of Willits. However, it was withdrawn as the change was unnecessary once the party better understood the requirements of existing water rights. And now to update you on water transfers. We continue to meet with the Department of Water Resources and the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and fisheries agencies every 2 weeks to coordinate and streamline water transfers. And since mid-February, we received 3 new transfer requests. One was from Placer County and requests to transfer 20,000 acre-feet to East Bay Mud starting in April. The transfer is in the noticing period, which closes March 24th. The other 2 transfers requested were from Reclamation District